By late July 1945, occupation duty had become little more than routine, and the 2nd Battalion of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment bore little resemblance to the battle-tested force that had fought through Bastogne, Alsace, and Berchtesgaden. Most of the original men from Camp Toccoa had already returned to the United States, leaving behind a unit that felt unfamiliar. Restless and searching for something worthwhile to occupy his time, Winters traveled across Europe 3 times within the space of 2 weeks. Bored, physically worn down, and eager for meaningful work, he accepted responsibility for supervising a large convoy of trucks bound for Paris as part of the redeployment effort for the planned invasion of the Pacific. The assignment quickly turned into chaos. Drivers arrived with worn-out trucks, damaged tires, and almost no equipment to keep the convoy moving. Tools were scarce, discipline was weak, and many of the soldiers were inexperienced replacements who had never seen combat. With so many seasoned non-commissioned officers already sent home, maintaining order became increasingly difficult. Winters pushed himself relentlessly to hold the convoy together, driving both himself and the men to their limits. By the time they returned to Austria, those soldiers had learned exactly what leadership in the airborne demanded: firm, demanding, and uncompromising. Colonel Sink considered the mission a success and rewarded Winters with several days to recover before arranging transportation aboard a special aircraft to rejoin the regiment. Meanwhile, a 506th had departed the Zell-am-See region by train and relocated to Joigny, France, a centuries-old town of narrow cobblestone streets southeast of Paris. Winters found little to admire there. The weather was oppressive, the town was dirty, and the battalion moved into quarters previously occupied by the 13th Airborne Division. The living conditions were unacceptable. There were virtually no latrines, and washing facilities amounted to little more than 2 small faucets located well away from the men's quarters. The troops were expected to live in miserable surroundings with little concern shown for their welfare. Rather than accept the situation, Winters secured lumber and whatever equipment he could find so that proper latrines could be built. The battalion also constructed washstands and shelters that allowed the men to wash and shave with hot water. The camp appeared to have once served as a German labor camp, and it astonished Winters that anyone had tolerated such conditions for months without making improvements. Another challenge soon emerged in the form of the Army's non-fraternization policy. German, Austrian, Hungarian, and Romanian women were officially off-limits, leaving soldiers to distinguish between a confusing mixture of nationalities among displaced civilians and foreign laborers. Winters recognized that enforcing such regulations perfectly was nearly impossible. His solution was straightforward: no fraternization of any kind. It was a clear order that eliminated arguments, even if he privately understood that not everything happening behind the scenes reached his attention. Years in the Army had taught him that complete compliance was unrealistic. His responsibility was to make expectations unmistakably clear, and from his perspective, the visible results were satisfactory enough. Over the course of several months, the men came to attention whenever they saw him approaching. He never considered himself intimidating for its own sake, but if standards slipped, everyone knew they would hear about it immediately. Experiences such as these steadily convinced Winters that, once the war was over, military life was no longer where he belonged. Seeking relief from the monotony, Winters took a week's leave and traveled to England. Captain Lewis Nixon accompanied him, and through a little ingenuity the pair managed to stretch 7 days into 2 full weeks. Winters headed directly to Aldbourne, where he was welcomed once again by the Barnes family. Mr. Barnes had passed away in late 1944, leaving Mrs. Barnes to continue running the small shop alone, but she had carefully preserved the room Winters had used during the regiment's stay before D-Day. It remained exactly as he remembered it, and a warm cup of tea awaited him upon arrival. The visit became the peaceful refuge he desperately needed. Aside from a single trip into town to attend a show, Winters spent nearly all of his time helping in the garden, mowing the grass, resting, and enjoying the quiet rhythm of ordinary family life. It was his way of repaying the kindness shown by people he had long regarded as his second family. After 10 restful days in Aldbourne, he traveled to London and spent several more days attending theater performances. When his scheduled flight failed to arrive, he unexpectedly found himself with one final evening in the city. Instead of enjoying the extra time, he experienced one of the loneliest nights he could remember. London was crowded with young airmen, whose conversations and outlook felt worlds apart from the shared experiences of the infantry. Winters found himself unable to relate to them. They were good men, but they had not endured what his battalion had endured, and there seemed to be little common ground. Eventually he withdrew to a quiet corner with a book, thinking only of returning to the men with whom he truly belonged. Back with the regiment, many of the soldiers were surprised to learn that most of his leave had been spent in Aldbourne rather than sightseeing across England. Winters explained that returning to the village felt no different from going home. Years of war had blurred many memories of ordinary domestic life, and countless soldiers no longer remembered what a true home felt like beyond letters and distant recollections. Aldbourne had given that feeling back to him. The warmth of Mrs. Barnes's hospitality, the familiar hymns, shared prayers, quiet conversations, and simple routines restored a sense of peace that had been absent from his life for years. Amid a world still recovering from destruction, her home remained a place of order, kindness, and calm, reminding Winters that such places still existed. 4 days before making what would be his final parachute jump, Winters found himself thinking back to the same period, a year earlier, when Easy Company had descended into Holland during Operation Market Garden. Despite everything the campaign had demanded, he still remembered the sense of exhilaration that came from matching wits with the enemy and prevailing through skill, determination, and quick decisions. Those moments of success remained among the most rewarding of the war. One memory stood out above the others. During the advance toward the outskirts of Eindhoven, Lieutenant Brewer had been leading his platoon across open ground. Throughout training, Winters had repeatedly warned Brewer against exposing himself by moving too far ahead of his men. On that day, he once again demonstrated how he wanted the platoon to cross the field before allowing Brewer to continue. As Winters followed some distance behind, he quietly remarked to nearby soldiers that Brewer was going to be hit if he continued the way he was moving. Seconds later, a bullet struck Brewer in the neck, dropping him instantly. The situation demanded an immediate response. Winters stepped forward, assumed control of the platoon, and continued the advance while another officer was summoned to take command. He remained with the lead elements until the objective had been secured. Looking back, he believed that pressing the attack rather than hesitating had prevented further casualties, while the speed of the advance also allowed medics to reach Brewer quickly enough to save his life. Although Winters often missed the responsibility and purpose that came with leading Easy Company in combat, he never longed for the miserable conditions that accompanied those memories. Holland had brought endless cold rain, sleepless nights, and constant uncertainty. He could still remember being soaked to the skin without a dry change of clothes, or even a blanket to keep warm. Darkness concealed both friend and enemy as burning buildings illuminated frightened civilians fleeing through the streets. Every hedgerow and every clump of bushes seemed capable of hiding German soldiers, making every step forward a cautious one. By the final week of September 1945, preparations were underway to return the remaining members of the 101st Airborne Division to the United States. Rumors spread quickly that soldiers with sufficient points, along with a number of senior officers, would soon be departing. Winters wasted little time presenting his case to Colonel Charles Chase. His desire was simple: to leave the army, return home, and begin the next chapter of his life. Remaining in Europe meant endless evenings spent reliving the war through stories and memories, something he had no wish to do. The peacetime army no longer resembled the organization he had respected during combat, and he had grown increasingly frustrated with the petty routines that now occupied everyone's attention. Colonel Chase listened carefully before assuring Winters that he had earned every consideration. Within minutes he promised to support the request, and he kept his word. Orders were issued on October 1st, transferring Winters to the 75th Infantry Division, a formation composed largely of High Point personnel scheduled to sail home with 16 Corps headquarters early that month. Before leaving the regiment, Winters attended one final Saturday evening gathering with the 506th. True to his nature, he stayed only briefly, leaving the social side of the event to younger officers who enjoyed such occasions far more than he ever did. The confirmation that he would soon be going home was almost difficult to believe. After surviving years of war, Winters reflected on how fortunate he had been simply to receive a return ticket across the Atlantic. Thoughts of home filled his mind. He wondered how much his parents, his sister, and even he himself had changed during the years apart. Simple comforts that most civilians took for granted, hot water, good food, and a fresh glass of milk, had become luxuries he had not enjoyed in a very long time. The journey home, however, proved far from straightforward. Plans called for enlisted men to depart through Reims, while officers assigned to the 75th Infantry Division would leave from Marseille in southern France. A strike by transportation workers, combined with the army's familiar bureaucracy, delayed the entire operation. 2 weeks after he had expected to leave Europe, Winters remained at Camp Pittsburgh, France, serving as executive officer of the 2nd Battalion, 290th Infantry Regiment. Most of the officers around him had seen comparatively little combat, yet many spoke confidently about the achievements of the 75th Infantry Division. Their accounts often left Winters quietly reflecting on his own memories of the Ardennes, particularly Christmas Day 1944, when Easy Company had been fighting for survival around Bastogne. To ease growing frustration over the delays, headquarters granted 3-day passes. Winters found little comfort in the gesture. He had transferred solely to return home, not to spend additional time sightseeing. Soon afterward, another piece of welcome news arrived when the Army lifted restrictions preventing certain field-grade officers from leaving Europe. With 108 points to his name, Winters suddenly found himself among a relatively small number of officers now eligible for immediate redeployment. On November 1st, following a 2-day journey across the French countryside, Winters finally reached the staging area. Since the battalion commander lacked sufficient points and had been transferred elsewhere, Winters unexpectedly found himself commanding the battalion. The trip itself provided no shortage of challenges, as countless eager soldiers attempted to ride atop railway cars or leap from the moving train whenever an opportunity arose to meet local girls. Keeping more than 1,000 men under control demanded constant attention and left little time to dwell on the delays. The staging camp outside Marseille offered little comfort. The rocky ground was so hard that tents could only be erected by driving iron stakes into the earth. During his final afternoon in France, Winters drove a jeep through the city, observing a port that still bore the scars of war. Sunken ships, damaged docks, and ruined warehouses served as reminders of the German withdrawal the previous year. Beyond the harbor, Marseille struck him as every bit the rough, weathered port city its reputation suggested. On November 4th, Winters finally boarded the Wooster Victory for the voyage to Hampton Roads, Virginia. As the ship eased away from the harbor, his thoughts drifted back to another crossing aboard the SS Samaria 2 years earlier, when he had sailed toward an uncertain future. The calendar showed only 22 months had passed, yet those months felt like decades. The experiences of Normandy, Holland, Bastogne and Germany had changed him forever. He understood that, like so many veterans, he would never again be the man who had first sailed to England in 1943. Even so, he believed he would adapt to peace just as he and the men of Easy Company had adapted to every challenge the war had placed before them. Do you feel there should have been another episode in the series to cover the time immediately after the war? Shifty Powers' accident, Toy and Garnier's trip home, and Winters experiencing life after Easy Company. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and if you aren't a subscriber already, why not consider becoming one? It's totally free.